Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel where we talk about Hungarian true crime cases, murders, mysteries and conspiracies, and my name is Tímea. You are going to see in just a few seconds that I'm gonna be with a bare face, no makeup on, because I decided to make this get ready with me chit chat style, where I'm going to share a very fucked up case with you. This case is going to involve the sexual assault, the physical assault, and the murder of a child. So if these are any triggers for you, I'm going to give you timestamps that you can skip over the graphic parts. This is also an episode of my communist crime series, not really because there are so many communist elements in this, but because of the time period and because of the fucked up, corrupt and lazy police work that was very common in this time. Other than that, if you are not interested in makeup, then just listen to this video podcast style. You don't have to watch me putting eyeshadow on. Let's just get right into it. And yes, I know I look very young without makeup, and that's because of my adult acne. I think I look probably 18. Well, I'm in reality 26. Today's story takes place in the town of Szőny in countryside Hungary, as always. And it took place on the 15th of June 1958. That was when a little 11-year-old boy called Pintér Pál, I'm going to call him either Pali or Palika, was at home listening to the Hungary-Mexico Football World Cup broadcast on the radio. It just so happened that his dad left town with the local football team to have a football match in another village or city. So he was alone at home with his mom. And because little Polly felt under the weather and a little sick, he asked his mom that she go to the teacher's house that night and let the teacher know that he would not attend the closing ceremony of the school year the next day. And because it was a small town, people just knew the teachers personally and they could just go to their house at night. So there was no problem with that. So his mom did that for him. But after going to the teacher, she also went to another neighbor to pick up some strawberries, as it was strawberry season. And this is how it happened that Polly was at home for about 2 hours that night between 7 and 9 p.m. However, when his mom got home at around 9 o'clock that night, she noticed that her son was not at home and nowhere to be seen. So obviously she started searching the house and the garden for him, but she could not find him. And because her husband was out of town and there was no emergency hotline for the police in the 50s, there was really nothing for her to do. So she just figured maybe he went out to play or something and he would return. However, when Polly was not home in the morning the next day, she really freaked out. And when her husband got back home from the football match, they decided to go to the police station to report him missing. The whole town was super involved in this little boy's disappearance. It was broadcasted on the radio, his picture was shared in the newspapers, everybody talked about it, everybody was trying to find him. And obviously the parents of this town started freaking out so much. Nobody allowed their kids to go out alone on the street at night because everybody was afraid that there was a murderer or kidnapper of some sort at large. And honestly, they were right about that. A bunch of tips came in and there was an anonymous phone call that stated that a person saw a car full of passengers stop by this little boy at night and drag him inside the car and speed away with him. And the police was able to track down this car, but there was no indication that they had anything to do with Polly's disappearance, so this tip was out the window. So the police continued investigating and they found their way to an 8-year-old little girl called Pulai Anna, who was the friend or playmate of Polly. And she said that she saw Polly walking and talking on the street with a 27-year-old man called Pente Béla. Béla, by the way, is a male name in Hungarian. It's not Bella, it's Béla. And I have talked about this in my first ever video, which, by the way, the quality sucks ass. Maybe I'm gonna refilm it one day. So the police went to this man called Béla and questioned him as a witness, not as a suspect. Don't forget that. And Bela confessed that he knew the little boy personally very well. And that was because Bela and Polly's dad worked at the same place, at the railway station, where Bela was a warehouse manager and Polly's dad was a car registrar. I don't know if this is the actual term for this kind of job, but the point is they were co-workers in the same place. Besides that, Bela always went to work by bike, and every day on his way to his shift, he stopped in front of Polly's house to talk with the little boy. Despite the 11-year age difference, they became very good friends because they had lots of mutual interests. Polly had his own little camera. This was a fashionable thing to gift cameras to boys so that they can take pictures as hobbies. But obviously it was an analog black and white camera, so the pictures had to be developed manually. And that is what Bela used to do for Polly. Because Bela himself was an amateur photographer, he had the means of developing pictures, and that's how they got so close. And Bela admitted to seeing the little boy at around 12:45 early in the afternoon that day, but he denied seeing him at 9 o'clock, like Anna, the little girl, said to the police before. And he was super involved in the search. He was always there for the parents. He was always there to ask about developments in the investigation, and he was just super supportive and active. And since there was no indication that Polly had ever left the town of Szöny, the investigation was restricted to the territories and the area of this place. So every place was searched in this town. 6 days after the disappearance of the little boy, a single red kid-sized sandal was found on a grazing field on a meadow, and when the police took this to the parents of Polly, they confirmed that it was indeed Polly's sandal, and it must have been the one that he was wearing when he went missing. So a search team was formed from the local men, and 7 days after the little boy's disappearance, they decided to comb through this area where the sandal was found a little bit better. And they indeed found more of his clothes scattered around this grazing field. Because this was a grazing field, there was a well in the middle of this meadow where they would usually fetch water for the animals that were grazing there. So they decided to go to this well and look inside if there are more clothes or some more clues come up. And it did. They stirred up the water, and what came up was kind of fucked up. It was a cartwheel that had already been broken into pieces, but it was fastened together with metal wires. And between the spokes of this cartwheel, there was the tangled up and decomposing body of little Polly. And he was wearing nothing except for his unbuttoned trousers that were pulled off of his hip. And this meant to the police that little Polly was obviously met with foul play, and this murder was most likely sexually charged. So they fetched the little boy's body out of the well and take it for an autopsy. And the forensic doctor came back with lots of findings. So first of all, there were lots of bruising and injuries to his legs, knees, thighs, buttocks, and genitals, meaning that this boy was severely beaten and he was most likely raped while he was still alive. They found a deep injury to the back of his head in the left side that was most likely made with an axe or a hammer or some kind of heavy blunt object. And he also had strangulation marks on his neck. And there were lots of deep cut wounds that were inflicted with a sharp object, such as a knife. That was when his body was picked up and thrown inside the well in order to get rid of the evidence. The forensic doctor also said that this little boy was technically killed 3 times because the blow to the head, the deep cut wounds, and the strangulation could have all been fatal injuries. So we have a body, we have a cause of death, we have a possible murder weapon or weapons, And now all that was left to find was the murderer. If you see the sunlight changing, that's because I am working with natural light and I have no other choice. Remember when I said that Pintér Pál was super helpful during the investigation? He was always there for the police and for the parents. After all, they were family friends. However, on the day that the little boy's body was found, Pál just disappeared. His family said that he told them that he would go to the train station to buy a ticket for the following week, but he would come back. However, he obviously never came back. He fled. And this obviously made him suspicious. Why the fuck does he just leave town? And for 2 days the police was trying to find this man, but they couldn't. It wasn't until a local man came forward to the police saying that he received a letter, a handwritten letter from Pál, stating that he had fled town and escaped because he was investigated as a suspect in a murder investigation. I also told you a few minutes ago that he was questioned as a witness and not as a suspect, so he just made himself out to be super suspicious to the police, claiming that he says that he was investigated as a suspect, when in fact he was not yet. And in this letter, Pál also said that now he is with a friend or an acquaintance in the town of Bagola, which was next to the Yugoslav border. And his plan was to escape to Yugoslavia to escape persecution. So since this tip was given to the police, they were able to go there and track him down. And they caught him just before he could have escaped to Yugoslavia. And when they brought him into the police to question, "Hey man, why are you going missing on the day when little Polly's body is found? Why do you want to escape to Yugoslavia, and why do you say that you are being investigated as a suspect?" when in fact you were not investigated as a suspect. So Pál had no other choice but to confess, saying that he was indeed the one who murdered little Polly. And his story was as follows. That day, on the 15th of June, he was in another town or village nearby, drinking with his friends, and he had a few pints of beer. He was kinda drunk, but not really, he was tipsy. So when he came back from this town, he decided to stop in front of Polly's house because he realized that he had some fucked up desires for little boys. So before he could even reach the door and knock, Polly's dog alarmed and started barking. Therefore, Polly looked out the window to see why his dog was barking, and that was when he saw that it was his 27-year-old adult friend in front of his house. So little Polly went out to greet him, and Pál came up with this stupid cover story saying that he was there to inquire the little boy about the most recent photographs that he should develop for him. And he also said that he had finished developing the previous pictures, and that if Polly came to his house with him right then and there, he would give it to them. So Polly was home alone because his mom was away with the neighbor, so he decided that he would go with his friend to check out their most recent pictures. So they go to Pál's house, and I'm not sure if he was actually given any photographs or not, but the point is, Pál went into the basement and picked up an axe and a knife while the little boy was waiting for him. And this did not alarm Polly because Pál was often seen walking around with an axe and a knife, like just for fun, and therefore it wasn't anything out of the ordinary. I don't know, I would not make friends with people whose regular hobby is to just walk around with deadly weapons, but I guess not everybody sees it this way. After this, Pál persuaded Polly to go to this grazing field with him where he would show some cool tricks or whatever. So the little boy went to the meadow with him, and that was where Pál told him to undress. And when the little boy protested, Pál struck him in the back of the head with his axe, raped his body, inflicted deep cut wounds on him with the knife, and when he was finished with his disgusting desires, he strangled the boy. Then he picked up his body and tossed it inside the well, as we already know. And he wanted to win time by keeping the body under the water as long as possible. Obviously, this well was always used to water the animals on the grazing field, so eventually the body was gonna be found. He also said that the reason why he scattered the clothes all around the meadow was because he thought that the police would not find it and they would not lead to him, which was kind of counterproductive. The reason why he was found was because of the sandal that was just left on the meadow. If he really did not want to be caught, why didn't he just burn the clothes or bury them or hide them better? Why did he think that scattering them around the meadow is gonna work? There you go. The police had a confession, they had a body, they had a murder weapon, they had everything, and because it was communist times, the police wanted to look good to the media as much as possible. So they did not investigate any further. They did not look into this, they just closed the case. And to me, one of the most craziest part of this whole case is that the media was allowed in on the interrogation room, and they were allowed to listen to everything and just report on whatever the fuck they wanted in the newspapers. And some of the articles that were published after his interrogation, many of the articles depicted him as ultra feminine, and the way that he reached to the cigarettes and to the water bottles, his fingers were so womanly, and the way he spoke was so soft like a little girl, and that he was homosexual. And the reason why, you may wonder, why was it such a centerpiece for the media? Well, obviously because until 1961 it was a federal crime to be homosexual in Hungary. I really believe that Hungary is still so backwards on this. When I was in England, I would see same-sex couples kissing in the park and all and hold hands. This would never happen in Hungary. Honestly, I still don't see this. People are not allowed to do these kind of things openly. On top of that, the articles explained Páli's death as a tragedy because he was a blonde-haired, blue-eyed boy and he was so smart at school. As if his hair color or eye color or academic achievements made him any more important than another person. This little boy's death was a tragedy and a huge loss for what it was. He was the victim of a vicious sexual lust murderer, not because he was blonde-haired. I don't even understand the writer of that article, what the fuck this person was thinking. It's disgusting. You can see that this case was so sensationalized because the murderer was a homosexual, and this was a bigger of a crime in the eyes of the media than him being a sadistic kidnapper, rapist, murderer, pedophile. No, none of those things matter as much as the murderer being gay. And this little boy is supposed to be more of a loss to our country because he was blonde-haired and blue-eyed, not because this was an innocent little boy who just believed his friend and... Oh my god. So the police had a murder weapon, a cause of death, a body, and a confession. So what else was there to do? Nothing, figured the police, because they were corrupt, lazy, communist cops and they didn't want to put any more work into something that could have been investigated further. You're gonna see in just a second. So his trial started exactly 1 month after the disappearance of the boy. So it was a super fast moving case. So on the 15th of July, his trial started, and it lasted only a couple of days on the first degree and a few hours on the second degree. And there is no jury in Hungary, so the judge was the only maker of the decision, and he was found guilty on all charges, and he was given the death sentence, which was going to be by hanging. So only a couple of days after, on the 30th of July, he was hanged. But the story doesn't end there, as you can see, because I'm not finished with my makeup. That means the story is not over yet. So just a couple of hours before his execution, Béla called the investigators because he had something else to confess before he's executed. He said to the police that he was not the only murderer that day and he had an accomplice, who was none other than his lover, or I guess boyfriend. He even gave them a name and an address and everything. But in Hungary there is no plea deal, there is no changing of the sentence, and there is no turning back once you were given the death sentence, so he was executed that day regardless. But as I said, the police wanted to be done with this and they did not really think that there was another murderer, and so they did not continue the investigation despite having a very solid tip and proof from the convicted murderer. So they did not investigate this tip for another 14 months after Béla's execution. That was when, however, they decided, you know what, maybe we should look into this a little bit more. He must have had a good reason to snitch on this person, and he gave us a name and an address and all. But obviously, so long after the murder, it was going to be harder to investigate this alleged accomplice. Either way, they were able to find this man, who was called Varga Miklós. And Varga, I know, sounds very similar to Vargas in Spanish, but it has nothing to do with that, and it's not the same surname. And this was a man who lived in the city of Győr. And when they went to him, he confessed to everything. He said, yes, everything that Béla told you before is true. And Miklós confessed to the police that they got to know each other with Béla in 1957, so 1 year before the murder. And when they realized that they were both gay, they started a romantic and or sexual relationship. And there's nothing wrong with that part of the story. However, in the April of 1958, so about 2 months before the murder, they met up again to hook up. And Béla confessed to Miklós that he had this little friend in his town, a little boy, and he had some sexual desires and he really wanted to experience having non-consensual sex with a little boy. There is no such thing as consent in the case of a minor, so it could only be rape or sexual assault. But I'm not monetized yet, so I don't have to censor the truth and call it a more politically correct name. It was rape. He wanted to rape the boy. Miklós was like, oh yeah, me too. I totally want to rape a little boy. Let's do it together. So a month later, they met up again, and that was when they set up the plan. They figured how they were going to coerce the little boy to come with them, where, how they're going to torture him, and the kind of things that they would do to him. And they made an agreement that if the little boy would at any point protest, they would have to murder him. But look, they themselves said that they wanted to rape this boy. But obviously Polly was gonna put up a fight, so I don't even know why they put the if in the sentence. And they also agreed that if one of them gets caught, they would not tell the police about the other person. This is why Béla did not let the police know about Miklós until the day of his execution. And yeah, the question arises again, why did he decide to snitch on him? And so the police was told the whole truth. Miklós told them that on the 15th of June, so the day of the murder, he took a train from the city of Győr to the town of Szőny in the morning, and he got there in the early afternoon. And Béla was waiting for him at the train station at his destination. And get this, because this is fucked up. Miklós whipped out his homemade Afrodisiac, which was none other than the crushed up, powdered form of dried wings of male insects that was supposed to give them a boost of stamina and sexual desire while they were raping the little boy. Y'all, this is so fucked up. oh, this is fucked up on every level, honestly. This is the kind of fucked up thing that Kis Béla would do, pickling his victims. Anyway, after this, they went to the meadow where the crime was going to take place. And Miklós waited there alone while Béla went to fetch Pali from home. And that is when Pali's confession kind of came into play, and it coincided with the same as what Miklós told them. That Béla went to Pali's house, who happened to be home alone, that he coaxed him out of his house to go to Béla's home to pick up the photograph, where he picked up the 2 murder weapons, and then he persuaded him to go to this meadow with him where Miklós was already waiting. And at first, Béla brought Pali inside this bushy area on the meadow and instructed him to undress. But obviously, Pali protested and he said, "I'm not gonna fucking undress for you." And that was when Béla got so angry at him that he struck Pali in the back of the head with his axe. And then Miklós and Béla together raped and sodomized this little boy's body. They inflicted very deep cut wounds on him, they broke his legs, mutilated his genitalia, and just did all kinds of unspeakable things to this innocent little boy. And when they were satisfied with themselves, they decided to strangle him. And so they decided to pick up the little boy's body, put it in the well, and put the cartwheel on top, as we already know. So now the police know the whole truth, and obviously Miklós was going on trial as well sometime later. He was also given the death penalty and he was also hanged, but I don't know exactly when. But I assume that it must have been very soon, because Béla's trial too was finished in just 2 weeks. I don't think that the police did a very good job, because it was not their hard work that solved this case. It was the efforts of the locals of this town who formed a search team and put their own time and money and efforts into finding the little boy. And honestly, the police, why did they have to wait 14 months investigating the second half of this case? So that is all there is to this case. What do you think of these fucked up murderers and the things that they did to this little boy, who was so not deserving of this? I feel so bad for the family, for the residents. I find it so fucked up what they did to the boy, these chocolate wafers and powdered insects. And the media reporting on this as if the crime was being homosexual and not being a lost murderer pedophile, and Pali's death being valued higher because he was blonde and blue-eyed. Honestly, nothing sits right with me in this case, but I'm happy that at least it was solved and Pali got his justice. But what do you think of this video format? Do you think I should stick to the storytelling kinds, or do you like that I'm doing something in the meanwhile? Because honestly, my ADD is much more manageable this way and I feel a little bit more confident. If you have made it this far into this video, please don't forget to like. That costs you nothing, and drop me at least one comment in the comment section, anything, whatever you want. The biggest help you can give me is that you subscribe, because I can see that 60% of you is not subscribed to my channel. Why not? You should be. I'm fun. I'm super interesting. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I see you in my next video. Bye!